Picture, if you will, the bustling streets of ancient Rome on a crisp morning nearly 2,000 years ago. Citizens from all walks of life make their way through the city, not for commerce or entertainment, but to fulfill one of their most important civic duties. Today, we embark on a gentle journey through time to discover the remarkable story of the Roman census, an administrative marvel that helped bind together the greatest empire the world had ever known. The Roman census was far more than a simple head count. It was a sophisticated system of governance that touched every aspect of citizen life, from military service to taxation, from voting rights to social standing. Imagine yourself walking through the campus Martius, that vast open space where much of this important work took place, observing the careful, methodical process that would unfold over many months. The origins of the Roman census stretch back to the very foundations of the city itself. Legend tells us that Servius Tullius, the sixth king of Rome, established the first systematic counting of the people sometime in the 6th century, before the Common Era. This wasn't merely about knowing how many citizens lived within Rome's borders. The early Romans understood something profound about governance. To rule effectively, one must first know one's people intimately. As you might picture a master craftsman carefully organizing his workshop, the early Roman leaders recognized that effective administration required detailed knowledge. Who were the citizens? Where did they live? What property did they own? What skills could they contribute to the state? These questions formed the foundation of a system that would evolve and endure for nearly 1,000 years. The census served multiple purposes that interwove like threads in a fine tapestry. Military recruitment depended on knowing which citizens were of age and economic standing to serve as soldiers. The Roman army, that legendary force that conquered much of the known world, relied not on random conscription, but on systematic identification of eligible men through census records. Taxation, too, required precise knowledge of wealth and property. Picture the Roman treasury officials working by lamplight in their offices, calculating the revenues needed for roads, aqueducts, temples, and the vast machinery of government. Without accurate census data, such planning would have been impossible. Now let us turn our attention to those remarkable officials who oversaw this monumental task, the censors themselves. Every 5 years, the Roman people elected 2 censors, men of the highest reputation and proven administrative skill. These weren't ordinary magistrates, but individuals entrusted with perhaps the most sensitive and important civilian duty in the entire Roman system. The censorship represented the pinnacle of a political career. Former consuls, men who had already demonstrated their leadership in war and peace, typically saw this office as a capstone to their public service. Imagine the solemnity with which these appointments were made, the weight of responsibility settling upon the shoulders of these 2 individuals who would, for the next 18 months, hold the detailed lives of hundreds of thousands of citizens in their hands. The census term, known as a lustrum, lasted 5 years in theory, though the active work of conducting the census typically required only 18 months. During this period, they wielded extraordinary powers. They could not only count citizens, but also evaluate their moral fitness for citizenship. A censor could remove a citizen from the voting rolls for immoral conduct, a power known as the nota censoria, marking someone with the censor's disapproval. Picture these dignified officials, dressed in their distinctive purple-bordered togas, moving through the city with their retinue of clerks and assistants. Their authority was both administrative and moral, combining the practical work of governance with the higher calling of maintaining civic virtue. The respect accorded to censors reflected the Romans' understanding that accurate, fair census-taking was fundamental to the health of the state. The actual process of registration unfolded like a carefully choreographed ceremony, repeated countless times throughout the census period. Citizens were required to appear in person at designated locations, typically in the Campus Martius for those in Rome itself, or at local administrative centers throughout the growing territories of the Roman state. Imagine yourself as a Roman citizen approaching your appointed registration point. You would arrive with your family, prepared to make a solemn declaration under oath. This wasn't a casual encounter, but a formal legal proceeding that bound you and your household to the Roman state in specific, measurable ways. The registration official, likely a clerk working under the direct authority of the censors, would ask you a series of standardized questions. Your name came first, followed by the name of your father, establishing your place in the complex web of Roman family relationships. Your age would be recorded, as would your place of birth and current residence. But the questioning didn't stop with basic identification. You would be asked to declare the names and ages of all family members living in your household. Your wife, if you were married, your children, both sons and daughters, and any other relatives under your care. Slaves, too, were counted as part of your property, their names and estimated values carefully recorded. The property assessment formed perhaps the most complex and crucial part of the registration process. Picture the careful attention with which these declarations were made and recorded. Landholdings had to be described in detail, their location, size, and productive capacity. Urban property, including houses, shops, and workshops, required separate evaluation. Personal wealth extended far beyond real estate. Livestock were counted and valued. Cattle, horses, sheep, goats, and pigs all contributed to a citizen's assessed worth. Household goods of significant value, jewelry, fine clothing, and luxury items all found their way into the census records. Even money itself, whether in coined form or as credits owed by others, required declaration. This wasn't mere curiosity on the part of the Roman state, but practical necessity. Military service was organized according to wealth classes, with the richest citizens expected to provide their own horses and equipment as cavalry, while others served as heavily armed infantry or light troops according to their means. The census determined not just whether you would serve, but how you would serve. Think of the trust this system required. Citizens were expected to declare their wealth honestly, under oath, knowing that false declarations could result in severe penalties. Yet the system generally worked, a testament to the Romans' civic sense and their understanding that accurate census-taking served everyone's interests. The documentation methods employed by Roman census officials reveal a fascinating blend of practicality and permanence. In an age before paper, let alone computers, the Romans developed sophisticated systems for recording, storing, and retrieving the vast amounts of information their censuses generated. Initial records were typically made on wooden tablets, covered with a thin layer of wax that could be smoothed and reused. Picture the census clerks, styluses in hand, carefully inscribing each citizen's information onto these portable tablets. The wax tablets served as working documents, easily corrected and updated as the registration process continued. But wax tablets, practical as they were for day-to-day work, weren't suitable for permanent storage. Once the census was complete and the figures verified, the information was transferred to more durable materials. Bronze tablets, expensive but virtually indestructible, received the final official census records. These bronze tablets found their home in the Aerarium Sanctius, the sacred treasury of Rome. Imagine this repository of knowledge. Room after room of carefully shelved bronze tablets, each containing the detailed information about thousands of Roman citizens. Here was the memory of the Roman state, preserved in metal against fire, flood, and the passage of time. The organization of these records required its own sophisticated system. Tablets were arranged by region, by wealth class, and by family groups, allowing officials to quickly locate specific information when needed. Cross-references helped track changes between censuses, monitoring the growth and movement of the population over time. Clerks and secretaries, many of them freed slaves who had demonstrated exceptional literacy and organizational skills, maintained these archives. Their work ensured that the Roman government could access detailed information about any citizen, from the richest senator to the humblest farmer, whenever administrative needs required such knowledge. As each great census neared its completion, the attention of all Rome turned toward one of the most solemn and sacred ceremonies in the Roman religious calendar, the lustrum, the ritual purification that would conclude the census and sanctify its results. The lustrum ceremony took place on the Campus Martius, that great open space that had witnessed so much of the census activity over the preceding months. Picture the scene. Temporary altars erected for the occasion, priests in their ceremonial robes, the censors themselves dressed in their finest official garments, and gathered around them, the representatives of the entire Roman citizenry. The ceremony began with the ritual counting of the final census figures. The senior censor would read aloud the total number of citizens registered, a moment of profound significance for everyone present. This wasn't merely a statistical exercise, but a recognition of Rome's strength and growth, a celebration of the civic body that made the empire possible. Following the announcement of the census totals came the ritual sacrifices. 3 animals were traditionally offered: a pig, a sheep, and a bull, known collectively as the suavet aurelia. These weren't token offerings, but substantial sacrifices, reflecting the importance of the occasion and the Romans' belief that divine approval was necessary for the census to be truly complete. The animals were led in procession around the assembled citizens, a ritual circuit that symbolically encompassed and protected the entire civic body. Priests examined the sacrificed animals for omens, looking for signs that the gods approved of the census and would continue to protect the Roman people. Prayers accompanied these sacrifices, elaborate invocations asking the gods to bless the Roman state and its citizens. The censors themselves offered personal prayers, asking that their work had been conducted fairly and accurately, that no citizen had been wrongly excluded or improperly assessed. As Roman influence expanded beyond the Italian peninsula, the challenge of conducting censuses grew exponentially. The provinces, those vast territories that came under Roman rule through conquest or alliance, presented unique administrative challenges that required creative adaptations of the basic census procedures. Each province had its own history, its own local customs, its own existing systems of governance and taxation. The Romans, practical administrators above all else, understood that simply imposing Roman census procedures wholesale would be both inefficient and potentially disruptive. Instead, they developed a flexible approach that maintained essential Roman requirements while accommodating local conditions. Picture a Roman census official arriving in a newly conquered Gallic town, or a Greek city that had recently joined the Roman alliance. His first task wouldn't be to immediately begin registration, but to study the existing local systems. How did this community organize itself? What records did they already keep? Which local leaders commanded respect and could assist with the census process? In Greek cities, for instance, the Romans often worked through existing civic structures. Greek cities had their own traditions of citizenship records and property assessments, systems that, in many cases, predated Roman involvement. Roman officials would adapt their standardized census forms to capture information in ways that made sense within the local context, while still providing Rome with the essential data needed for taxation and military recruitment. In more recently conquered territories, particularly in regions that had lacked sophisticated administrative systems, Roman officials might need to build census procedures, essentially from scratch. This required not just administrative skill, but cultural sensitivity, working with local leaders to explain the benefits of accurate registration while respecting traditional ways of organizing community life. The famous census, conducted under Emperor Augustus, recorded in the Bible's account of Jesus' birth, illustrates how these provincial censuses worked in practice. Citizens were required to return to their ancestral homes for registration, a requirement that served multiple purposes. It helped ensure accurate counting by preventing people from avoiding registration by moving between communities. And it also reinforced traditional family and regional ties that remained important for local governance. Local census officials, often drawn from the provincial elite, served as crucial intermediaries between Roman administrative requirements and local communities. These individuals, typically wealthy locals who had received Roman citizenship and understood both systems, could explain Roman procedures to their fellow provincials while helping Roman officials understand local conditions and customs. As centuries passed and the Roman Republic gradually transformed into the Roman Empire, the census system evolved to meet changing political and administrative needs. The personal rule of emperors brought new purposes and procedures to what had begun as a republican institution focused primarily on military service and taxation. Under the emperors, censuses became more frequent in some regions and less frequent in others, depending on local conditions and imperial priorities. The emperor himself often took personal interest in census results, seeing them as measures of the empire's health and prosperity. Large increases in population and wealth could be celebrated as signs of good governance, while declines might prompt investigation into local problems or administrative failures. The standardization of census procedures became more systematic under imperial rule. The formula sensualis, a standardized set of questions and procedures, helped ensure that censuses conducted in Britain would collect information in the same format as those in Syria or Spain. The standardization made it easier for central administrators to compile empire-wide statistics and make informed decisions about resource allocation and policy. Women's roles in the census, while always secondary to those of male heads of household, became more clearly defined over time. Though women typically couldn't register independently, detailed records of their legal status, property rights, and family relationships became increasingly important as Roman law evolved to grant women greater economic autonomy. The census records themselves became valuable historical documents, consulted not just for immediate administrative purposes, but for resolving legal disputes, establishing inheritance claims, and documenting the growth and prosperity of communities throughout the empire. Imagine the satisfaction of a Roman archivist, perhaps working in the great libraries of Constantinople or Alexandria, carefully cross-referencing census records from different periods to trace the fortunes of particular families or regions. Picture now, as we draw near the end of our journey through this remarkable administrative system, the lasting influence of Roman census procedures on the development of government record-keeping throughout the Western world. The concepts developed by those long-ago censors and their assistants, systematic registration, standardized procedures, permanent record-keeping, and the connection between civic duties and civic rights, continue to influence how modern nations organize themselves and serve their citizens. The Roman census stands as a testament to the power of careful, systematic administration in building and maintaining large, complex societies. Through 18 centuries of evolution, from the kings through the republic and into the empire, this system adapted and grew while maintaining its essential purpose, creating the detailed knowledge necessary for effective governance. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you might imagine yourself as one of those ancient Roman citizens, walking home from your census registration with the satisfaction of having fulfilled your civic duty. You've contributed your part to the great record of Roman civilization, adding your family's story to the vast bronze tablets that preserve the memory of one of history's greatest administrative achievements. The census clerks continue their patient work. The censors review their careful calculations, and somewhere in the distance, preparations begin for the lustrum ceremony that will sanctify another successful counting of the Roman people. In the quiet efficiency of this ancient system, we can find something deeply restful. The comfort that comes from knowing that careful attention to detail, patient record-keeping, and the systematic organization of human communities can create something both practical and profound, something that serves immediate needs while building institutions that endure across the centuries.